So I'm Billy with Evil Motorsports. Today we're going to be going over part of our pre-track inspection. Basically, this is something that you should be doing every time that you're getting ready to go out to the racetrack. We want to make sure that the car is actually ready to do what we're about to put it through. So I have lots of items on my list that I check every time I go out. Today we're going to focus just on the brake pads. Some people question whether they need a track-specific pad when they're going to go out and put their car through its paces. The reality is, it is your best option. So we'll go over some of those pros and cons, and we're going to put those on here shortly. So these are our new track brake pads. These are our Carbotech performance brakes. This is actually the XP12 variety of brake pad. This is something that I've ran on the front of this car for several years. I like the way that the Carbotechs work. Definitely a good feeling on the pedal, and they're friendly on your rotors. They tend to last quite a while also, but a really good high temperature pad. These actually have a temperature range of about 250 degrees to 1850 degrees Fahrenheit. So they can usually take the weight of this heavy Subaru car. So these are the tools that we're going to be using today. We have our impact so we can get our tires on and off. We have a small screwdriver. This is going to allow us to drive the pins out of the calipers. We have our flat blade screwdriver just in case we need to move some things around. Needle nose pliers, very important so that you can actually get the little circlips out of the pins. And then something that's a little bit larger and non-marring in case you need something to actually push the pistons out. This comes in very handy sometimes, especially if you wore the pads down a bit. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started by removing our street pads. This is the 1521 compound by Carbotech. It works really well on the street. Less dust, less noise. The problem with running track pads on the street is they're usually pretty loud and pretty dusty. So a lot of people don't really want to run track pads because of that. But if you change them out right before you go to the track, you don't have those issues. So after you've pulled your pins, basically you just need to swap out your pads. Sometimes you might have to push the pistons back in a little bit before inserting your new pads. It just kind of depends on how close your street and track pads are on thickness. If you do have to push them in, sometimes it's best to just use something that's maybe non-marring that'll be nice on the pistons. Most of the time, if you're tracking the car, the pistons and the caliper are going to be pretty much shot. As far as the seals are concerned, they usually start cracking after 1 or 2 good track days. You might have to push the pistons back a little bit, but they usually just kind of slide in. We'll add our retainers and our pins, and this side is essentially done. One of the biggest problems with this is actually sliding in your second pin because of the spring tension. So just get it time, and it'll go in. And with that, the driver's side track pads are installed. The last thing to do is just make sure that you're okay with how many cracks you have in your rotor. It's normal to have surface cracks in the rotor, but you shouldn't be able to actually catch a fingernail on anything. So if you run your finger across, There should never be a point where you're actually getting stuck on any of the cracks. The other thing to inspect while you're down here is your brake hoses. Your brake lines can sometimes start to leak. You should always make sure that you're okay with how your lines are looking and that you don't have any damp spots or any buildup. So on the back, I'm just going to measure the thickness of the pads and make sure there's enough for the day. I leave the track pads on because they do dust a little bit more, but it's kind of a hassle to change on the back and they don't really make much noise for me. So that incident we just saw on video there, that just happened after we'd installed the new set of track pads. Luckily, we just put those on. That new set of pads just saved our situation. We would have been in the back end of that BMW if we wouldn't have had something made to take the extreme heat that can be delivered when you actually have to stop on track when you don't mean to.